All right. Well, let's see. It's late, I guess. It's 10:15 or so Mountain Time. I thought I thought I'd do. Man, this looks really crooked. Hang on. I thought I'd do a quick little live feed tonight. I say that, and they're never. I you see the thumbnail? Expert advice. If you came here for expert advice, you came to the wrong place. But I did want to have. I wanted to have a little bit of conversation about. Yeah, I know, Charlie. Right? It's never quick. It's always like an hour long, no matter how hard we try. So, um, it's early Jan, kind of middle of January, right? The rumor is that rates are sketchy. I don't know if you guys have heard that rumor or not. Um, but I was looking, I was reading some of the different trucking Facebook pages and stuff, and the rumor is that the rates are pretty sketchy in some places. And all kidding aside, we've seen some of that. We had a we had a truck. Um, we had a truck. Most of our trucks have done really strong numbers the past couple weeks, both on miles and on revenue. But we did have a truck that was just in a bad area, and it was pretty rough. But we finally got them out moving on a load that's going to put them in a good spot tomorrow. So that's promising. But I was reading a lot of the comments, and this guy sort of is what caused me to go live. So here was his comment. I don't know. I don't remember which Facebook page it was. Here's his comment. His comment was, "Hey, I just bought a new truck. Does anybody have any advice?" And I thought to myself, I think the single most important piece of information or advice for anyone that's looking to get into this industry during this time of or this business is don't ever buy a truck or start a lease in January. Um, you might have a couple good weeks of rates in early January, but soon after that, you're going to have um, really hard 2 months worth of rates and running to have a chance at making. I mean, you're literally starting your business in the worst possible time of the year if you buy a truck or get into a lease in January. You'll quickly be fooled the first week or two of January because, man, the back half of January, all of February, and probably the first half of March is really brutal rates. I mean, you're really setting yourself up to be in a pretty steep hole. Um, I think making matters worse, guys have a tendency not to run. Nobody wants to run cheap freight. And so I think you're not going to run as many miles as you want. If you're not running miles, um, you're not turning revenue. You're also not putting maintenance or dollars into your maintenance fund. And so if something bad does happen to your truck, even if it's a new to you truck or a brand new truck, um, maybe if it's a brand new truck, you've got warranty. Okay, fine. But guess what? You still have bills to pay. All right. I feel really bad. I'll tell you this. I feel really bad for these guys in the past year or so that got into brand new trucks, brand new trailers, throw out lots of money at Chrome and all that sort of stuff, because I mean, these guys are going to have, $1,000 to $1,300, a week payments. Times these rates right now are not conducive for those individuals. They're just not. I feel really bad for this guy that bought a new truck. And because let me tell you, if you're coming to the internet for advice or expert advice, and you're asking what do I do, or does anybody have any advice? Man, you're going to get trucking industry is not shy of providing really direct commentary on that. Holy cow. It can be pretty rough. So yeah, my advice would be don't get into that space. The other thing is, know your costs, right? Anybody heard that before? Man, this is a time of year when knowing what your costs your true cost per mile is really, really critical for us. Um, we keep our year-over-year numbers and all that sort of stuff, but for the starting spreadsheet. So right now, with pretty shy mileage under the belt, our cost per mile looks relatively inflated. But I know what our costs were at the end of December with the whole year's worth of numbers, and it will fluctuate. But I have a pretty good idea. So for us, we try to balance that those two important pieces of the puzzle, which is kind of mileage and time, as well as revenue, and that's what we look for. I know for a lot of guys, they try to do the same things, but unfortunately, if guys are just refusing to take certain loads, or if they're in some bad areas and they try to take some of the short hops, guys, I saw rates on the load board today as cheap as 63 cents a mile. And yes, that was for 40,000 pounds, full truckload, 63 cents a mile. That's pretty nuts. Will had sent me an email. Let me see if I can pull this up. Will had sent me an email from a broker, and the conversation was kind of an attempted negotiation back and forth on the load. And I guess the broker had told Will, listen, when a truck comes into Florida, we know that you're not going to go east. We know that you're not going to go west. We know that you're going to go one way, and that's north. And so if you only have one way out, why should we pay you when you only have one way out of the state? You're sort of a trapped commodity. And so, Will was doing his best to try to have a conversation with the guy. And let me see if I can post this guy's comment. The guy's comment, Bob's reply back to Will says, thank you. By the way, sounds like your driver may not be interested in going north. LOL. So that's basically Bob's way of, extending the middle finger to Will and his driver, saying, I guess if you don't want to go north, meaning if you don't want to take my load, then you're not going to go north. Find some other way out of the state of Florida. Pretty interesting, pretty rude. I mean, pretty rude comment from the guy. But like I said, he's basically giving him the middle finger. I hate to say this. I'm surprised that I've had a lot of calls over the last couple of weeks. Most every one of them have been extremely professional, that sort of thing. I don't know why they wouldn't. They're sort of making money hand over fist right now on off of the backs of the drivers. So I don't know why they wouldn't be in a good mood. But most all of them have been incredibly kind, incredibly professional. Even a couple of them have been funny with some of the rates. I had a guy today. We were pretty far apart. I think we were like $1,800 apart on a rate. And he literally said this. He said, "Look, I think this is a pretty fair rate for this lane. He was a broker agent, right? Let me go talk to the broker and see if we can do that." And he comes back and he says, "Look, man, I've got news." He said, for like $1,500 cheaper. He's like, "So look," he said, "I know you guys are a good carrier." He's like, "Obviously, you're not gonna agree to that." And I said, "No," but I thought that was kind of funny. But it's a game of attrition, trucking as a whole. I don't care if you're a small carrier or a lease operator, owner operator, it's a game of attrition. And when I look at all these comments on all these Facebook sites and you see all these guys in the comments, the kind of the whining, the complaining, the frustration, the furiousness, I can't help but wonder what things felt like 6 months ago or 8 months ago when all the drivers were saying, you know what, screw brokers and screw this and screw that. I'm not going to move my truck for, $4 a mile. I only move it for $5 a mile. So, what's that saying? Turnabout is fair play. And, man, the turnaround has been fast. It's been furious. And it's kind of the real deal. So, man, it's that time of year. And I'm telling you, all it takes is a few of the larger brokers to start posting some ridiculously low rates. That freight gets moved. And lo and behold, it really is like blood in the water, and the brokers are the sharks, and they are swarming really quickly they see guys are going to move that freight, and so everybody drops the rates. Rates actually appeared. Today was a little weird. There were some areas where the rates were strengthening, and then there were some areas where the rates were actually worse than they were the last couple of days, which is kind of hard to believe. And so it's interesting. Mr. Understanding, answer her. My wife asked a question. Well, let me see your question. I don't think people get it. Let me go way up. I missed it. I don't think people get it. Where do they get to? Let's see. Misunderstanding says, shouldn't you be shutting down the roads now instead of when rates? So listen, that's a really good point. What's the name of the group? Somebody remind me. What is it? It's something Black Matters. What is it? Black. Somebody make a comment. What's the name of the group that's going to be shutting down? Apparently they have like a Facebook page. I haven't seen it. But I was made aware that they're going to be shutting down sometime in April. And Black Smoke Matters. That's it. So here's the first thing that I thought about, right? I understand. I mean, I don't know what their whole motive is. I think I can probably make some fair assumptions. But the first thing that crossed my mind when I was told that they were contemplating a shutdown in April, the first thing that went across my mind is, I mean, how can I say this and not be rude? So the first thing that went through my mind was, why in the world would whoever is leading this organization, why in the world, and I'm sure that there's some clever reason that I don't know, but why in the world would they choose April as the time to shut down? Because if I were trying to rally together tens of thousands of truck drivers to shut down, I would not choose the period of the year after 2 months of horrible rates when guys have lost asinine amount of money. And when rates are starting to really increase, I would not then ask tens of thousands of drivers who have been struggling to make the bills and get good mileage and get good rates. I wouldn't choose April. I would choose probably February to shut down, because quite frankly, that target most in February, your rates are going to be the poorest. So why wouldn't I choose the month where I'm going to lose the least amount of money if I shut down? That was the first thing that crossed my mind. And I'm sure that there's a reason and that sort of stuff. I don't know. I just don't understand. Like I said, I haven't been on their page. I don't know what their whole MO is, other than I'm sure that they want increased rates and that sort of stuff. I did read a comment or two the other night, sort of around that topic. And I guess the other thing that I found so perplexing is, if I go back, a year and a half, and I look at the significant emotional response to e-logs, you sort of had, I would say maybe 25, 33% of the industry saying, look, I don't mind, e-logs are fine, it's whatever, it's good. And you had a really large contention of drivers, both company as well as owner operators, that were adamant that e-logs were going to damage the industry. My comment was, look, I think shippers and receivers are the least prepared. And I think that sort of bore itself out to be true. I think, we're sort of seeing that the shippers and receivers have caught up mostly, so the loading and unloading times aren't. But when I look at that, people were furious and irate about the government's intervention, the government's regulation. Countless different videos I saw, both on YouTube and Facebook and training sites and what have you, where they were talking about, this industry is overregulated. We don't need the government. We don't need more government. We need less in our industry. Look, whatever your side of the argument is, whether you're for that or against it, I don't care. I sort of tend to agree that at some point, maybe too much regulation is a good thing. And I think our industry is certainly has its fair share of regulation. But when I look at the Black Smoke, I guess, Matters sort of contention, if the MO is exactly that, of, we want, I think what I read the other night was, we want, and again, I don't know if this guy was affiliated with it, but he said, we should never be allowed, no one should be allowed to offer a rate less than $2 a mile. Okay. That's going to require government regulation, government intervention. So here's the problem, right? You can't, whatever, a year ago, you can't be screaming and, and yelling about regulation. We don't want that. Get out of here. Get out of our industry. Let us do our thing. And then a year later go, wait a minute, we need government regulation. We can't haul anything less than $2 a mile. Like, you sort of can't talk out of both sides of your mouth, right? Pick one. And I'm not saying that you have to pick one side or the other. Maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle. What I think needs to change is, I don't think we need more regulation. I think we could probably stand a little bit less of it, to be candid. But what I do think we need is a stronger understanding of just solid business principles and how to run a business, right? And for that individual that made the comment about, I just bought a new truck, any advice? Man, that just seems like a not a well thought through business plan if you decide to go and purchase or get into a lease in January. Again, you're going to have 2 weeks of good running, and then you're going to have 2 months of really poor rates, as a general rule of thumb. Now, I don't know how long rates are going to be bad, that nobody does. But if you look at historical data, it's going to tell you that it's going to be the last week or two of January. It's going to be, I'm not going to say stagnant, but certainly it won't probably see a significant spike up until you get into April. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents. Million dollar question is, who's taking loads under $1? Man, Captain Jack, good question. I don't know. But here's the thing, right? Most of the loads that I saw, and I've been looking, really in most every state. I haven't spent much time up in the Dakotas or Montana. Actually, I looked at Montana a little bit, but the Dakotas, way up northeast, New Hampshire, Maine, I haven't spent much time looking at rates there. Aside from those 4 or 5 states, I've kind of spent a fair amount of time looking at rates everywhere else. There's a lot of really sketchy rates. You guys are probably seeing that if you guys run the spot market. Pretty rough numbers. And like I said, when you start looking at these numbers, I know a decent number of owner operators. I talked to quite a few of them, and I know about what their cost per mile is. Their cost per mile, a lot of these guys are in the $80s and what have you. Now, here's the caveat. Some of those guys that are running cost per mile in the $80s have a salary built in. Okay. So, but some of those guys don't. And so for those individuals that don't have a salary built onto their cost per mile, and they're running at high cost per mile because they've made decisions to go buy, really big, really nice, really whatever. And instead of investing that money into saving for your business for when times get tough, the proverbial rainy day or the rainy month of February and March. And instead they chose to go throw, lights or chrome or whatever it is. Lights and chrome look really nice on trucks. Don't get me wrong, right? And it looks awesome. I just prefer to have money in the bank account for when bad times happen. I prefer to capitalize. I'd prefer to have that money sitting there knowing that if I'm stuck in a bad area, if I need to tap into that money to deadhead to put my truck in a really, I can afford to do that without being crushed. So that's my 2 cents. And I think, there's a lot of poor decisions, again, by a lot of individuals. And unfortunately, I hope that doesn't come out to bite them. I saw somebody else make a comment on one of these other Facebook pages. Said, man, why are so many people, and this I think typifies our industry so well. The comment was something, why do so many people harping on owner operators like you want them to fail? And God bless the one guy that just said it exactly like it was. He said, look, of course I want you to fail, because the less trucks that are out here and the less guys that are taking really bad rate, the better it is for me. Our industry is a commoditized industry, and our industry is a cutthroat industry. No 2 ways about it. I give the guy credit. And there were quite a few comments just ripping that guy. But the guy just said what was true. Eric's in here. What are you saying, Eric's? It's the Wild West out there in freight broker land. No laws, no regs. Well, there's some laws and there's some regs, but I think I know where you're going with that for sure, right? Eric, I agree. Why would you choose April when rates are starting to get good? It's mind blowing to me. It's mind blowing to me. I just can't fathom it. If I were gonna look right now, you spend any amount of time, you can spend 5 minutes on any of these Facebook sites, and you see the anger, the frustration, the fury that a lot of drivers are exhibiting. If I'm trying to touch and get tens of thousands of drivers to shut down, I would choose right now when the emotion is high and rates are poor and guys are they're going to lose less. But also the emotional investment is really significant right now. It wouldn't take a lot to start a big bonfire, right? I mean, there's as many fumes as there are. Just light a match and flick it, and it just, to me, now's the time to do that. But that's just my opinion. What do I know? Bob Americano, Captain Jack. I took paper from Orlando to Macon just to get out of Florida at $1.15 per mile. He says, I know folks who will take loads for $1.30 and less every time. Well, look, we were talking the other night, and I've talked often about the whole cheap freight, especially when it relates to Florida, and I guess it could be other areas as well for that matter. It doesn't have to be just Florida. If you are an individual that is moving into an area where there's a lot of poor freight coming out, if you do that, a decent number of times a year, the numbers will tell you, the data tells you if you run it, that you are in fact more profitable to take that cheap load out a relatively short distance versus deadheading out all the time. And guys say, look, I don't want to do that. If I'm going to go into Florida, I'm going to take my backhaul with me. What that means is I'm going to go in there for $2.50 or plus a mile. If I know I'm going to be getting $1 to $1.20 coming out, I don't have a problem with that. I don't disagree with you. But when you deadhead out 600 miles, if you're getting $1 a mile, that's going to pay for your fuel, right? That's $600. If you're doing that, 12, 15 times a year, man, do the math, right? I mean, that's $8,000 or $10,000 of revenue in your pocket. So, in my opinion, as I've said, and I think deadhead is going to be that topic right now because when rates were great, the argument was very real to be made when in the last year and a half when freight was paying $250, $280, $325 or more. Man, I don't want to waste my time, right? Then yes, I absolutely want to just deadhead out of there. I don't want to waste my time hauling that load. I want to get to my next good paying load, and so. By saving that day or day and a half that would take you to get loaded, move that freight up 600 miles and get empty, right? Take a 10 and whatever, and then capture that next load. You could have already been making a lot better money. And so that's when that argument really plays itself out well. When you're going to deadhead 600 miles out to go capture, freight out of let's just say, here, I'll just do a really quick search. Freight out of Georgia, Atlanta area, and that freight is paying $1.50. Let's see, Atlanta. What's the point, right? Why waste $600 of revenue that you could have captured to help offset costs when you're going to be just deadheading out to capture? Let's see. Let me just kind of rattle off some rates. And I'm just, again, right, these are the posted rates. That's all I'm saying. $1.33 a mile, $1.13 a mile. Here's one for 227. That goes 397 miles. Takes you up to Corbin, Kentucky. $1.69, $1.32, $1.41. $1.04, $1.19. Why do I want to deadhead out to Atlanta to capture those kind of rates? I don't know that it doesn't make any sense to me. Where you guys want to deadhead out farther? Indianapolis. Let's see what the rates are kind of like. This, again, I'm just kind of looking at posted rates, right? So take that for what it's worth. So if you want to deadhead all the way from, say, Florida up to Indy, Let's see what some of the posted rates are here. $1.35. Here's one for 316. That goes 900 miles. Goes up into Massachusetts. Here's one for $2.04. That goes back down into Florida. You can go to Rhode Island for 261, but you're going to get slaughtered coming out of there. So rates appear, at least posted rates appear to be better, but a lot of this stuff is going back up deeper into the Northeast, Boston, Maryland, Rhode Island, right? So you're going to get really stuck out of there. So again, why do I want to deadhead, 900 miles to capture crappy rates? So the numbers really dictate in times like this that you take that cheap load. And then guys get furious again because they're like, man, that's just a self-perpetuating cycle. And look, I can't disagree with you, right? Because if nobody's taking that freight, I see a lot of loads that were posted, for example, yesterday that popped right back up on the board again today, right? And yeah, there was worth a little bit more. I'm going to tell you this too. Here's some non-expert advice. I saw another one of these pages. They were talking about posting of trucks, and they said it's an absolute waste of time. It's a joke. You don't ever post your truck. I saw a couple brokers chime in as well, and I said, "Man, I don't ever call. I haven't called on a posted truck in over a year. It's a waste of time." And maybe that is true. I can tell you guys that whenever I am dispatching, one of the first things I do is post the truck. If I'm dispatching for an extended period of time and I booked a load from whatever, Denver to Cincinnati, the first thing I do after I sign that rate confirmation and I go back to the load board is I post that truck when it's going to be available in Cincinnati. I had 2 trucks in Denver today. They delivered today. I posted those trucks I think 2 days ago. Yesterday I received about 4 or 5 calls on those trucks. Today I probably received 6 or 7. Denver this time of year is known for having poor freight, and there was a lot of poor freight. But I received 12 or 15 phone calls for trucks in Denver, and those rates were, I would say, 15% or so, maybe 20% in a couple occasions higher than a lot of the calls that I was making. So I don't know why you wouldn't use every tool at your disposal. Again, especially when it's free, right? You're already paying for the load board of the service if you're using it. So I would absolutely be posting my truck. That's my 2 cents. Michael says, "Hey Bob, it's the same from the Northeast. I took paper to Maine for $1.10." Truckers Coach, how's it going? Jason says, "I think brokers are manipulating the market, taking advantage of drivers while charging the same rate but paying less, causing a lot of this in the downturn." Jason, I made a live feed the other day or 2 ago, and I said the exact same comment. I actually went to a little bit further of extreme. So I was calling on a load. It was Kansas City. I forgot where it was going. So Kansas City to somewhere. And the rates were, I want to say around $1.75, I think is what it was. And so since we're a shipper, I called a couple of the brokers. In fact, the broker that I spoke to that was offering that load at about $1.75 a mile, we've used them in the past to move some of our freight for our company, right? Because we ship our own stuff. So I called them. I said, "Hey, I have an intercompany load. I think I said it's going to be some plastic. It's going to weigh about 15,000 pounds. So it was a really light load. And I said, I'm just curious, what would you guys charge me to move it?" Now, I gave them the exact same lane, Kansas City to wherever that other run was going, that paid $1.75, and they were charging me like $4.80 or something like that. Okay, so I would agree, right? And I said, "Well, hey, I thought the market was soft. I thought rates were cheap." "Oh, well, no, not in your market." Right? Well, I just got the phone call 5 minutes before, and they were offering a load that was much heavier at $1.75. So I agree with you. I do think there's a lot of manipulation. For those of you guys with load boards access, there's something else that I noticed I thought was really strange, kind of along that vein. I would look at the load boards kind of semi-often. I don't normally see a lot of the brokers taking down loads, but if you pop on a load board now, this afternoon, in fact, I was talking with Will a little bit ago. He was commenting there was 800 and some odd loads within whatever the distance was out of the Connecticut area. And I'd made the comment. I said, it's really interesting. They're really taking. It looks like to me that they're taking down a lot of the freight, kind of in the early evening, and they're reposting it the next day. And I said, why would they do that? Other than an attempt to show if drivers are shutting down at night, typically, and they're looking at load boards and their options, and it looks like there's only a fraction of the loads available. I don't know why else they would. I don't know why else they would do that unless they just want that load to repost the next day and for it to look fresh the following day. I don't know, but I find that a really strange technique. It's not something I've noticed in the past. Maybe that's always been the case, but I haven't seen that consistently. But it's really strange that, and I think Will had even commented where there was 800 and some odd loads earlier this afternoon. Tonight there was like 300 loads, so 500 loads disappear. I don't know, kind of strange. I'm sure some of that is some loads that guys got covered and inadvertently stay up on the board. We all see that, but I don't think it's 500 loads worth. Greg Edmond says, look at the percentage of owner-operators during the regulation period versus now. 80% of owner-ops wouldn't exist in a rate-regulated industry. You're probably right, Greg. You're probably right. Bob says, even with the Landstar boards, I've had to haggle with the broker. There's been a lot of haggling, that's for sure. I had a broker call me yesterday on a load. It was Denver out to LA. And I made them an offer, and they came back like $400, $500, $600 less, and I said no thanks. They called me this morning. They said, "Hey Scott, remember it's Austin, and we spoke yesterday." I was like, "Oh yeah." And he said, "Hey, you still have that truck available? We'll take that rate." And I said, "Well, we do still have that truck available, but obviously now that it's the day of, right? The calls that I'm getting again on the posted truck, the rates are increased, and so we're probably not so willing to do that." And in any event, so they were then willing to come. I think I raised the price $300 or $400, and they were willing to do it. And then as after they sent me the rate confirmation, true story, about 5 or 10 minutes after they sent me the rate confirmation, they called back. "Oh no, we're not gonna. We don't want that load to move." Right. So they found somebody else that'll probably do it for cheaper. I made the comment. Will and I were looking a little bit ago on the JB Hunt load board. A couple runs. I forgot where it was. It was going to Stockton, California. I forgot where it originated. A couple guys were bidding around $3,500. The very next bid. Now you can see these offers, right? You can log on and see that someone bid $3,500. The next bid, I think, was $800 cheaper. I don't know why you would cut $800 out of your cost, but that's just me. I don't know. Bob says, "I'll never shut down. Why would I cut my nose off to spite my face?" Jason says, "I sent my little dog." So it was Will. He's a company driver. Mike, Cali Produce, still paying decent. There are areas, there are pockets. I mean, we've been really fortunate. I've been running. I took a really. I think it was somewhat of a calculated gamble, but it was a gamble nonetheless. I moved most of our trucks to a particular region. We've been doing some circles, and we're turning about $9,200 over 8 days. And it's some longer runs, and it's kind of good. The drivers are looking at it kind of a good news. Maybe a little bit of bad news. So in this cycle, it takes about 74 hours to run these legs, and so the drivers are having to get a reset about 3.5, 4 days after they take a run. What that means is, as we kind of talked it over amongst the drivers, is they're still averaging about 32 to 3,300 miles a week. And my concern was they were going to have some heartburn over having to reset after 4 days, right? Not typically something that you want to do. In this case, they looked at it and said, "Look, we're getting really good miles. We're thrilled with that. You're making good revenue. That's a good thing for the company. And the fact that we have to take a 34 in the middle of this it's not the worst thing because we're not having to work, quite as hard. We get a little extra time down. So they were able to find kind of the positive in what could have been a negative for them. And they're willing to understand that, look, we might be able to get a few more miles if we ran a different lane right now. But that wouldn't be good for the company. And so very much a give and take. And I don't think you find that in a lot of companies in this industry. I feel like, quite frankly, many cases drivers are just all about them, right? And our guys are looking at it differently. They're looking at it as they're winning and the company's winning, and that's a good thing. And so that's very much appreciated. Bob says, I plan on deadhead, but I always look for a backhaul. Yeah, absolutely. Neo says, I'm new here. Nate, Phoenix, man. So look, really quick, Nate. I feel like I may have gotten soft or softer than I already was. It's like 60 degrees outside. And when outside, I was like, oh, I felt like I need a hoodie. It's 60. So Phoenix is good. Benjamin Duke says it appears the Texas Florida is bill money, run to get to a profit load. Just saying I break Monday to Wednesday, then Thursday through the weekend. I'm getting profit rates worth my time. Well, that's good. And look, the other argument, right? For those of you guys, especially those of you guys that are lease op runner ops, is when you're coming out of Florida, the other argument is to take some of those really short runs that are going to pay you $600-800. The problem is, $600-800 for whatever, 100-mile run, and take 2 or 3 of those to work your way up out of Florida or Georgia. The problem is those runs aren't really appearing on the load board. Those $600-800 runs in the past. Let me just check Miami. I glanced at this earlier just to check that exact topic. Let me see what those little short runs are paying out of coming out of Florida. Let's see here. Here's case in point. So here's one. Tampa to somewhere else in Florida pays $800. So I stand corrected. 254 miles. Lithia, Florida to Louisville, Kentucky, paying 44 cents, as in 044. $400 to drive 907 miles. Miami to Chicago, paying $1,200 on 1,384 miles, a whopping 87 cents. So there's not a lot of those short runs that are really worth it, right? So, interesting times. I've got dedicated Atlanta to Chicago and Chicago to Dallas, and then Dallas to Orlando. My dead spot is back to Atlanta. That's good. If you can find that triangle that works for you, that's the way to do it for sure. Track your information and work out a plan where to be and at what time. If the broker calls in a posted truck, I tend to get my rate. I agree. I think the chances are far better when you're posting your truck and you're getting brokers to call you, right? Typically, you tend to do a little bit better, right? For sure. So I just think it's interesting, but the rates are tough, and I feel for those individuals that really didn't take a hard consideration. Will said it best earlier when we were chatting. He said, "Man, I don't care how good the rates were and for how long. The fact of the matter is this industry is very cyclical, and the rates are going to turn, and they are. And we know for a fact that the rates are always going to be, well, not always. The rates tend to be really poor last part of January, all of February, first little part of March. Again, after the 4th of July holiday, the big push is over. You're going to see really similar poor rate. I mean, we even saw that this past year when rates had been exceptional, for 8 months or longer. When July 4th came, the few weeks after that into August, really poor rates. I mean, guys were going, screaming, about rates back then. So this industry is cyclical. Even in times where rates were really good, we saw some pretty significant drops. This drop seems to be, more significant maybe than I've seen in the last few years. And maybe that's wrong. I haven't looked at all that data all that closely. It just sort of the eye test seems that it's a little bit more steep. And maybe it is more steep because the rates were higher. So I guess maybe that's why. Pamela says it isn't just that time of year. Oh, I'm sorry. Isn't it just that time of year? Freight is typically slow, January, February. And absolutely right, Pamela. That's one of the things I'm saying is it is slow. I don't remember seeing rates. I don't remember seeing the quantity of rates this low, which I think is what's interesting is because there is still there's still a lot of freight. I talk to the brokers, and the brokers say, "Oh, we just don't have any loads to push." I look on the load board in the spot market, and there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of freight. I mean, like Will said, I think he was searching like 250 miles outside, around Connecticut, almost 900 loads. I've been seeing 300 loads in most of the areas that I've been searching around the Ohio area. I mean, there's just a lot of freight out there. So I struggle to see what the brokers are seeing when they say they just don't have many loads, because there's a lot of freight. But yeah, you're right. It is that time of year for sure. Benjamin Duke says, very true. In the last 2 weeks, the 100 to 250-mile run are at least down by $200 to $400 than the 15-day average. And that $200 to $400 on a percentage basis, we had a guy, I think I mentioned this the other day, we had a guy up in the Northeast, they had a doctor's appointment. And so we were just going to take some of those short runs for 4 or 5 days to kind of keep them around the area to make sure they made the appointment. And man, really quickly, the rates went from $1,000 to $1,500 for a lot of those shorter runs down to $400 to $500 to $600 for that same run. So pretty significant street changes. Johnny, I agree with you, man. I'm not an expert. I just thought it was a really good thumbnail. Bob says, I watched a rookie buy his Pete last May. It's up for sale. No business plan. Running blind is foolish. I've talked about this on several other videos, right? When we've discussed, the lease op game, I believe last sort of May was really that's when I sort of, I felt like at that time, it just didn't make sense to get into a 5-year lease. I sort of felt like maybe the window was starting to compress on the really quality rates. I don't have a lot of data to back that up, other than I have some data and some research and then some gut feeling. But I was pretty hesitant. If you were someone that got into a truck in May, you had all of May and you had June and the first part of July for good rates. Then you had poor rates in July, August. September was sketchy and it came up a little bit, but then October and early part of November was pretty soft as well. I felt like December was decently strong for rates. I don't think it was quite as good as maybe the year before. The first few weeks of January have been pretty good, and now they're tanking. So if you don't have a plan and you're going to get into this business, the cost of entry into this business is pretty significant. If you're going to be leasing, inquiring whether this is a walk-away lease, because that tells me that they're looking at this as a gamble, a chance, and they want somebody else to fund that without them taking seriously the risk. I mean, you're looking at a cost for truck and trailer, so. I want to see, I sort of tend to want to see guys that are really seriously committed to making this work, have done the research and have thought through it. And I've said this a lot too. For those that are still looking to get into the lease op and the owner op space, I think you need to take a serious look at where you reside. Where you reside should dictate, whether you're going to haul flatbed or reefer or dry van or whatever. Kansas City has, I think, a lot of really good reefer freight, and it pays better than average, in my opinion. So if you are someone that's a lease operator in Kansas City, I wouldn't probably run dry van, right? I would probably want to run reefer. If I lived in whatever, 100, 150 miles away from the decent, a decent lane for reefer, but dry van where I'm at is probably run dry van, because every time you go home, you're going to have that deadhead when you come out, and that deadhead will add up pretty significantly. If you're someone that goes home, every week and a half or 2 weeks, if you're having a deadhead 150 to 200 miles every week and a half to 2 weeks to find a decent rate, that adds up. So just thinking through stuff like that, I think, makes a big difference. Pete's crave a lot of, no doubt, man. Some people, well, there's not just Pete's, but a lot of trucks. I mean, that's, most of our trucks that we run are automatics. And I'll take every advantage that I can get. If I were an owner operator, look, I like shifting gears just as much as anybody, but I would take every advantage that I could get. Greg Inman brings up a great point. He said, at times like this is when it helps to work on getting niche markets covered. Well, I had a call last night from a broker on the truck that we had. In fact, it was another Denver truck. As it turns out, the guy manages some relationships. He's a broker managing relationships with other greenhouses in a different part of the country than ours. And when he saw our name, he was inquisitive and, was curious if maybe if our drivers might be interested in trying to run for, a couple month period to haul their freight, since we had that experience. And so that was an interesting conversation, right? It's a very niche-y thing. And so I agree, Greg, trying to find your niche in a specific area. This industry is also probably best known for having that willingness to do what other people maybe don't want to do. The other day, I mentioned this. We had a run. I forgot where it was originating, but they wanted to go to the Bronx, right? And I don't particularly like sending anybody in there. If I've got a driver that doesn't mind, okay, fine. It was a really good rate, right? Really good rate. But we didn't really want to do that. If you're someone that doesn't mind doing that, you're willing to do what others typically don't want to do, you can capitalize on that. I'm the man. Johnny, listen, your check's mailed. Thanks for saying it. That's funny. Benjamin says, I understand your numbers with their relation to you and your niche and your freight. The big stores are doing inventory at this time. This is an average marathon with saving and cut cost in the feast cycle. Well, here's the rough thing about our space, right? Our fixed costs oftentimes can be really high, right? And our variable cost, fuel namely, can also be really high. And we have zero control over fuel, right? Fuel will be your single biggest cost, and you have zero control of that, other than choosing to run in an area that maybe has cheaper freight. But you have zero control of that. What you do have complete control over is the decisions that you make before selecting the tools of your trade, meaning you can choose not to have or at least have control over the cost that you're going to pay every week or every month for your note, for your truck and trailer. So now we all understand there's both sides of that, right? I mean, it's a situation where you could have an older truck that may have some maintenance issues. You could have a new truck that hopefully doesn't, but very well could. So it's a gamble for sure. But that's the only thing that you control is your cost to entry. And if you choose to have a significantly high cost to entry, when you look at the periods of time that we're going to have sketchy rates, again, 6 to 8 weeks now, and 6 to 8 weeks in July and August and early September, well, that's 4 months out of the year, right? You take in the other times that you're going to be home just to be home, as well as the typical holidays. Now you're sort of sitting at around probably half the year is going to be good rates. The other half of the year is going to be pretty sketchy rates, or you're not running. So you really need to consider that. You really need to capitalize on those 6 months where you're going to have the better than average rates, right? that's probably the time for you to jump in and shut the left door and start shifting gears. I was considering taking a lot more of your home time when the rates are just horrible. But that's a lot easier said than done. I realize that. Yeah, you're right, Hul. Gonzalez says he lives in the Bronx. Which division do you recommend? Thanks in advance, man. I don't. We don't run. We don't run there. We do run. I do. We do send a lot of trucks to Pennsylvania, Boston and Jersey and sort of some of that. But we really try to stay out of, the kind of the inner city, the boroughs, and that sort of stuff. We try not to go. We try not to go up there. Chicken Micah says, "What's the best for Florida, reefer or flat?" So, van, reefer, flat. So, candidly, we do run a little bit of dry van, not enough that I would feel comfortable in giving any kind of advice. We run absolutely no flatbed, so I'm useless to you there. Like I said at the beginning of this video, like not the expert. We have a really good handle on reefer. We've been doing it long enough that we have a really good handle with it. Look, the cost for reefer versus dry van, obviously there's a pretty noticeable difference, especially if you're going to go with the Thermo King presidential model or whatever they call it. That's another $5,000 over the carrier unit. I do like the flexibility of running reefer, and if I get in a bad area, I have the option of running some dry van. We've had to do that, from time to time. So I'm not really the person to answer that. Trucker, what was it, Micah? Like I said, we have had some decent luck out of Florida, and we've had and coming out. I would, like I said, my recommendation, guys, if you are someone that's going to run Florida, and right now, the Florida rates are good going in. I mean, relatively speaking, they're paying. I mean, anytime you see a pretty decent rate, it's probably going to Florida, and it doesn't matter where it's coming from, that or the upper Northeast. And I would just look at that run, and I would blend those two runs together. So if you're going to get whatever $2.50 a mile going in, and you're going to get $1.15 or $1.20 coming out, I would come out as short of a distance as you can, and I'd blend those two rates together, and you're still going to probably blend at $2 a mile, or maybe just a touch over. And that's a win, guys. If you're turning a profit, that's a win, right? I think when you look at that rate and you say, I'm going to get $2.15 going in, again, because what you're going to deadhead out to, I mean, what we just sort of glanced at is you're probably going to have to deadhead as far as Indy just to get a decent rate. So I would really take a serious look at kind of blending those two rates and saying, if the broker told me, hey, I'm going to get you into Florida for $2.50 a mile, or excuse me, into Florida, and I'm going to reload you out to Atlanta or wherever, I'm going to pay you, $2.10 a mile, all miles. That's a good deal, right? That's a win. So listen, take a win every chance you get. If you play or gamble, I don't care if it's slot machines or poker or whatever. Anytime you get your money back, right? I don't care if it's the same amount of money that you put out there that you didn't lose, that's a win, right? So just win. I mean, where's the motto for the video? Just win. Find loads that are a pain, find out a solution. Yeah, Benjamin, that's another good point. Man, I have seen I have seen and gotten calls and called on so many loads that were multi-stop. Just seems like there's a lot of those. And most of those brokers or shippers aren't paying the rate that the truck would need for the amount of time that's on them. But when I explain that to some of the brokers, some of them are willing to pay a rate would be conducive for that truck to take those. The difference for us is we're just in a lane right now that is paying really, really good compared to the industry. And so I don't want to go anywhere else but where we're at. I want to milk this for as long as we can. But if we weren't running the lane that we're running or we didn't want to run that lane, then some of those multi-stop runs aren't so bad. Pamela says short haul in the Midwest seems pretty good. There are some areas that are pretty good. You're right. Some of the Chicago today is paying a little bit better. India was paying a little bit better. Ohio, I think, is still kind of soft on some of that. Minnesota wasn't bad. Michigan wasn't bad on some of the shorter stuff. So some of those shorter runs are starting to bounce back a little bit. Sketchy rate calls for sketchy drivers. That's funny. Bob, there you go. That's a good answer. Most of the stuff down in I-4 in Florida is van or tanker, so good to know. Never truck about bankruptcy. The old truck doing better with less work. So I'm still trying to figure out. Look, it's a tough game, man. It really is. Like I said, if you really look at your downtime and the amount of time of the year where the rates are a little sketchy, you know, it's probably 6 months of good, 6 months of bad. Maybe it's 7 months of good. And again, probably a lot of that depends on where you live. It could be, but point is there's a noticeable amount of time, right? So build your business around that. Some OJ concentrate. Yeah, we had some of that. I was offered some of that. I was offered a run yesterday. I think they had like 20 runs over the next 7 or 8 or 10 days that these guys had to move. And it wasn't bad. I mean, it was, I think, a 500-mile round trip, and they were offering a decent day rate. And we sort of kicked it around for a little bit. And had they had originally told me they had a load for the next day. And had they had that, maybe we probably would have grabbed that and just ran, because that would have been really easy revenue, consistent revenue for the next 7 days for that truck. But they didn't. They didn't have a load the next day. They wanted me to sit for a day, and I said, "We'll sit." They didn't want to pay for that day, so we just went and did something else. Peter, shout out from Toronto. Very bored. Heavy hooker here. Awesome. Good for you. Welcome. Broker paid $12 a mile. Johnny says he blew all his money on chicken lights and chrome. Listen, I think chicken lights and chrome look awesome. I'm just not sure that I'm willing to spend a lot of money for it. Greg Emmett says, what are you seeing for an average per mile on 3,000 miles? Man, it totally depends on where you're going. If you're going from west to east, I'm seeing pretty consistent 5,500 to 6,800, kind of depending on where you're going. But that typically is paying northeast down to Florida. If you're running sort of to the mid-Atlantic area, it's towards that 52 to 5,500. If you're going from the East Coast over to the West Coast, it's about half that. I see a lot of rates in California that are $1.20, $1.30. And that was from kind of Atlanta all the way up to the Virginias and a little further north. So really pretty poor rates going over. If you're going to blend those two, so you're going to blend 4,000 and maybe 6,000. So you're going to turn $10,000 over. You're going to turn $10,000 over what, 13 days, right? Probably not so good, right? To me, the rates on the East Coast need to be a little stronger for you to want to make that turn. Even if you look down into, even if you look at running down into Nogales or Yuma and bringing up some of the produce and coming back out, those rates have softened some. So going back to the East Coast. So, and plus, not to mention, right, when you were, I mean, there's there's that huge storm that's coming in, right? They're talking like 40 to 60 inches of snow in Reno. I think it's supposed to hit Chicago with double-digit inches is what they're projecting on Saturday sometime. So you have to deal with that as well. And look, that's another piece of this puzzle. You know, freight sort of above I-40 tends to pay a little bit better especially once you get up around the I-80, I-70, I-80. That stuff up there pays a little bit better than the stuff running down south, right? You don't have as much weather. Something you guys want to consider as well, right? Typically a little bit cheaper fuel prices. Lack of weather, not having to be stuck in a truck stop for a day or two, that's just lost revenue, right? So maybe it does behoove you to run south. I know a lot of people tend to run south this time of year versus running up north. Eastern South Dakota to Eastern Washington, $3,800. Yeah, so like I said, you just have to see what it's working out for you on total miles and total time. Let's see, Eastern South Dakota. What'd you say, Greg? Rocky Mountains east to upper southeast and back. I'm not. Again, it's just okay. I'm not seeing anything that really, in my opinion, warrants that. I don't see it right now. Rates bounced a little bit better today than they were the first couple of days. 3,000 miles out so you're saying like 1,500 mile trips, 3,000 miles total? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that could be worth it. That's not bad actually if you're turning it like that. Wind and whiteout advisories this weekend, I-80, yeah. And that's part of it, right? Guys, I want to mention something else really quick, and then we'll start to we'll wrap this up. I saw the comment on another one of these Facebook pages. I mentioned this the other day in my video. Talked about adding value, and a lot of these drivers were they were super trucker, chest pounding kind of comments of, I don't need to contact a broker. I've got your load. Don't call me. Don't check call me. I'm a super trucker. I'm going to pick it up and I'll have it delivered on time no matter what, right? Don't bug me. Kind of that mentality. I'm just going to tell you, not only have I, and we're the opposite of that. Our guys are communicating incredibly well with brokers. We're seeing that we're being paid more to communicate. I sell that value, and oftentimes I'm getting another $100 or $200 on a load because of it. That's worth it to me. Also, I think I've mentioned this in a comment or two. I think it's incredibly strange that these same individuals that tend to say, I'm not going to communicate with you, don't worry about it. Whenever they order a $50 Amazon package, they're the first guys to start typing to see where that freight is and when it's going to arrive on their door. But yet they don't want anybody else to macro point them or to know where that truck is along the way. I'm sure if they had $50, $60, $80,000 in a car that they restored and they were sending it somewhere to a car show to try to earn auction, they'd want to know where that investment was all along the way. You don't think that a shipper and a broker wants to know where their investment is along the way? So for you to have the attitude of, I'm super trucker, don't call me, blah, 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 I think that's really foolish. I think it's childish. I think it's unprofessional. I can tell you right now, the first time, if we had an owner operator that hauls for us, the first time that they didn't answer the phone or call us back or tell us what was going on or give us an update, I'd fire them the second they got back to the yard. And I tell them why. It's childish. That's not your $100,000 that's on that trailer or your $50,000 that's on the trailer. It's somebody else's. Good job. And your job is to take that freight from point A to point B. And oh, by the way, I've had several examples over the past week or two where I'm selling the value of, look, we're going to communicate. You don't have to babysit us. You want us to do our check calls? Absolutely. Don't worry about it. You want to text? You want to text every time we shut down along the way? Tell you what the reefer temp is? Tell you where we're at? On time delivery? Any potential issues? We're happy to do that. And you know what's pretty funny? One of two things happen. Brokers go, oh my gosh, that would be awesome. I would love that. And some brokers go, you know what? That's awesome that you would offer that. I'm good. I'll just trust you that you don't have to do that. Like if you're offering it, that's a good thing. So it kind of goes both ways. But literally, yeah, just as recently as the video, I said, look, I'd like another couple $100. And oh, by the way, if you'll do that, here's what we'll do. And I even kidded her. I said, look, I'll even put it in writing that if my driver doesn't do this, then you can take money off of the rate con. And she kind of laughed and she thought about it for a minute. And she's like, you know what? That's a deal. She gave me $200 more because I just told her our driver was going to do what a driver should do anyways. So, you can absolutely put a dollar value on that. Is that trivial? Yeah, but you know what? It's just another way to kind of connect more with that person and get more money out of it. I don't know. To me, it's worth it. I mean, for crying out loud, let me just say this too. I don't know. Look, you guys are driving 10, 8, whatever, 8, 9, 10, 11 hours a day. And you guys are on the phone all the stinking time. What's the big deal but just giving a broker a 30-second phone call? I mean, how hard is that? You guys are on the phone all the time anyways. Sell value. You're making phone calls anyways. $2 a mile, good power only. Is $2 a mile good for power only? If that's all miles, that's probably not terrible right now. Yeah, it's probably not terrible. Power only probably do a little bit better, but I think you would. I think most people would tell you right now, if you're getting $2 a mile on all miles, that's probably really good. Yeah, that's not bad. Johnny Boy says, "Thanks, Scott. You add a lot of value to the industry." Well, you're welcome. I'm not sure everybody shares your same opinion, but that's good. Acceleration rules. Phone stops ringing when you roll the truck. Look, I mean, it's just funny, right? I don't know. Brokers are scary. Yeah, some brokers are scary. I don't know. We've had pretty good luck with most of them. Is Jay still running? Yeah, Jay's still running. He blocked you a few months back. This is a time of year, man, when a lot of that due diligence in the past, a lot of the time you spent making decisions, is gonna pan out so that you make it or you break it. And man, I'm a strong advocate for knowing what your costs are, knowing your cost per mile, knowing what your costs need to be for a daily average. If you're going to be one of these guys that are lease op or owner op taking short runs, you need to know what those costs are. You need to try to do some due diligence. Look, I'll tell you guys this. For the revenue that we're getting, it comes at a pretty significant cost, right? Our drivers are running hard. I am averaging making about 100, and I would say my average is probably 150 phone calls. On the days that most of the trucks are moving, I might be only making or receiving 100 phone calls. On the days where I've got several trucks getting empty, I'm probably making 200 phone calls, and that doesn't include. Last night he texted me, and I didn't miss it. I looked at my. I had 110 unread text messages yesterday. Right. So it comes with a lot of effort. So, for a lot of these guys that are screaming and stuff, I mean, trust me, I see it too. We just are doing something about it. That's a lot of phone calls every single day. I start at 5 o'clock in the morning making the phone calls. That's 7 o'clock Eastern. And, I'm usually up 30 minutes before that, kind of looking at where the trucks are. And who's where, and what's the weather like, and where do I want to be? Where do I want to move? Doing the research. I don't know. I think a lot of guys are probably watching idiots like me on YouTube versus doing their research. Nothing personal if you're watching YouTube right now. Pamela says, totally reasonable. I'd want to know where my truckload of money is too. Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know. 1-800 annoy Scott. My poor, I feel bad for our drivers. They have to deal with me. They've been awesome. They're running hard. They're doing a good job. I mean, they communicate, just even the simple things, guys, like for me, they just send a text, like whenever they're shutting down, hey, I'm shutting down. I'm at this city. And I expect an on-time delivery. I mean, just that little thing just puts my mind at ease. It's such a helpful thing, and it takes them 10 seconds. Cracker. Let's see. This is for all you. This is for all that you do here. As someone fairly new to the industry, you've consistently been a rock in what this industry is and what it is. I really appreciate it. You tell it like it is. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks. I do tend to tell it like it. Look, I have a funny conversation for you guys. So we're hiring. This time of the year we try to hire some drivers. So we're kind of going through that process. And I had a conversation with a gentleman today, and ironically, he actually lives about 30 minutes away from where I grew up, a little town in Oklahoma. And so we were chatting, and the guy doesn't know me from YouTube. He's never heard of me before, kind of a thing. And we weren't 10 minutes into the conversation, and he kind of just laughed. He said, "Man, if you don't mind me saying," and he's an Oklahoma guy. He said, "Man, if you don't mind me saying," he's like, "You don't mix words. You're sort of just right straight to the point. You don't BS much." And truthfully, the first 10 minutes of the conversation, I wasn't really sure that he was completely interested in us. And I told him, I said, we're sort of like that. Like most of us in the company, our drivers are certainly like that. And most of the office personnel on the transportation side is like that. And it's good because nobody gets in trouble for telling the truth. You know what I mean? Bad things happen, and we just try to solve those problems. And so, man, after we sort of had that conversation, he realized that it was just really honest. And I told him, I said, "Look, we're really great at some things and we suck at other things. And here are the things that we suck at." It sort of changed his mindset. And he's like, "Man," and he even told me, he said, "Look, you can have Howard call me and I'll absolutely have a conversation with him, but man, just go ahead and send me your paperwork. I'll fill it out." The guy, and look, that's a driver. I think we all know how kind of contentious drivers can be. And this guy was looking for the right spot, and he felt like, a place that's just going to be brutally honest, whether that's good or bad information, was viable. So yeah, we don't tend to mix a lot of words. Sadly, I think you're right, Cracker. It does seem to be a little bit of a rare thing nowadays. Yeah, the biggest challenge for me has been for a long time, and still is, how to say something directly that doesn't come across as rude. Let's see. Bob says he was pro pre-trip, 30-minute break. Told him to come back to bite him in the per mile rate. And he got all his reconciler. Listen, Canal did pick up some painting, and I was thumbing through Facebook the other night, and I mean his stuff. This is my opinion. I'm not trust me. Like stick figure is about as good as I can do. Man, he's got. I haven't seen him log some of his paintings in the last whatever 2 months or whatever. I watched him do one of the knives. He's gotten good. Joe does what Joe does. He does, man. Joe's his own person. You can't blame him. Look, you don't have to like anybody, right? But I have a lot of respect for people that just want to do them and are comfortable in their own skin doing them. So acceleration, I agree. Canal does have a face for radio, as do most people on YouTube, myself included. We've got the face for radio. So, hey, look, that's kind of my long video tonight. Rates are rough. I hope a lot of guys did some due diligence. There are pockets of good. Make sure you're dispatching. If you have a dispatching service or your company, I mean, putting in the legwork to try to find the good spots. And I'm not saying do something that's unsafe, but find a lane that maybe you are comfortable doing that maybe the masses aren't so comfortable to do. Scott, commission a painting from Joe. Flowers in the hair. Bob says, I've got 3 hours before I start. Man, I apologize to one of my drivers today. I put him on a run. He was the guy that was in a bad area, and I'm just going to bite the bullet. I don't want to sit there and waste. Look, as I told him, I said, we're going to lose money on over the next couple of days for the area that he was at, trying to step him on short runs. I've been looking for the short runs, and it's just not panning out. And he got empty this afternoon. And I said, so I'm going to lose money on a long run, or I'm going to lose money over the next 4 or 5 days trying to step you out. Either way, I'm going to lose. I'm the one that sent you there. Shame on me. I'm going to lose. But if I step you on these little short runs as a company driver, That's not good for mileage for him. So I said, at least one of us ought to win in this. So I'm just going to blow you out of here. We're going to hang some miles on you. We're going to get you out of this area. Um, and, but to do that is going to require him, I think he's got to get up at like 2 a.m. So probably right about now, and he's got to get rolling. And so I apologize. Like, man, I'm sorry that I stuck you here, and I'm sorry that I put you on this ridiculous run that it's going to have to, you're going to get up 2 a.m. and he's probably going to end up hitting some of that weather. And so I apologized, and he was good about it. James Hensley, how's it going, buddy? Hope you're doing well. You're up late. We're just kind of wrapping up, man. We need loads. Listen, there are a lot of freaking loads out there. There's a lot of loads. There is. And my advice is post your truck. All right. Here's the synopsis of this crazy long video. Post your truck. Be professional when you're talking to the brokers. If you're going to take the time to make a call to a broker, even if they give you a bad rate, be professional. Go ahead and make them your offer. What I hear so often is guys will call and load, and maybe they want whatever, $3,000 for the load. The broker offers $2,000. Everybody gets a little frustrated because you feel like your value is worth $3,000, and they're basically saying, I don't value you. You can get mad and just say, hey, thanks, whatever. You can hang up the phone. You can slam down the phone. You can whatever. You might as well say, hey, look, I mean, you've already made the phone call. You might as well just say, hey, look, this is my rate, right? If something changes, give me a call back, because I can tell you, it's not a high percentage of time, but man, guys, it'll happen, right? They'll call you back, and they very well may give you that rate. Again, it happened to us yesterday to today. They were pretty far off on yesterday's rate. They didn't move that load. They called me again today, and I offered a few $100s more than I offered yesterday that they didn't take. So if you already got them on the phone call, go ahead and just keep it professional. Give them your rate, and who knows? Maybe it's not on that load, but maybe it's on the next one. It is always like this in January and February, waiting for people to get their tax return money. Yeah, that's sort of what they say, right? Is it doesn't tend to kind of change. A lot of the commodities have been sold, and there's just kind of that dead period of time. I don't know if that's true or not, but logic says it kind of makes sense. There's a plug for Logic Neo right there. And here, TS. Here's the other thing I guess I find a little strange is, I mean, look, the rates are pretty sketchy in some areas, but this should not be a shock to anybody. I mean, if you're surprised by this, you've got to be new to the industry, or you're not paying attention. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so that kind of gets back to the business plan, knowing what your costs are, determining what you want to do, how you want to move your truck, when, where. If you're surprised by this, you've got to be new to the industry. And if you're not new to the industry, this should be a red flag. If you're surprised by these rates, you need to be doing more homework, right? Because your business is going to struggle if this catches you off guard. Americana says, yes, I usually get a fuel spike or unloading fee from the brokers. Be nice and polite. They'll throw you a bone. Man, far more often than not. Look, we had a load tonight. There's a pretty good paying load, close to $4,000, and our guy we deadheaded 181 miles to this load, and we took this same run last week, and it was sexy. It paid a little over $4,000 last week. Actually, that's a pretty good example, right? So this load early last week paid just right at $4,200. And our driver did a hell of a job, communicated well, did everything he was supposed to do. And so rates were tanking this week, right? And I called that broker and I said, hey, any chance you have another one of those loads? He said, I do. Can you do it for $3,850? And I said, we can, right? So we ended up doing it for $3,850. It was a good rate. Driver gets down there tonight, deadheads 181 miles, and he calls me and says, hey, this pickup number is not right. Turns out It turns out it wasn't the right pickup number. They did not even have a load. So they gave us the tonneau. I talked to the lady about that. I said, hey, this is great now. I appreciate the tonneau. Problem is our deadhead was actually more than the tonneau, right? And so without batting an eye, she says, look, I see the notes in here, and I talked to Steve, the broker, and he'll call you tomorrow, and he'll make this right for you guys. Didn't have to do that, right? But the fact that we took a run last week, the driver did a great job. A bad thing happened on this run. And when I talked to her, she's like, oh, by the way, here are the runs that I have available, right? So they gave us some different options. But at least we'll get taken care of. I guarantee you, if we were jerk about that situation, if we flew off the handle because the load was canceled, they're probably going to say, here's your $250. Thanks for playing. And the chances of us getting another load that pays $4,000, $230 a mile in today's rates, it's probably not going to happen, right? We're probably not going to have access to that freight anymore. So again, it's really frustrating, and we can file that under, that's trucking. But, professionalism goes a long way. And you guys all know, none of us have a love affair with brokers, right? There's no secret there. So, but if we do show them a little love and a little professionalism, probably goes a long way. Still can't make great money right now. Just need to know what lanes to run. And that's the tough part. Like I said earlier, man, I probably average 150 phone calls a day. And every one of those phone calls, I get just a little piece of information that is valuable for our trucks, right? If I'm not making those phone calls, if I'm not doing the work, then guess what? Our guys probably aren't going to get very good miles. I'm probably not going to get very good money. We're going to result in losing money. I can tell you this right now, guys. We have had situations in the past with dispatchers. I can tell when they're not doing as much work. Hey, SoCal, how are you, man? I can tell when they're not doing much work. You know how I can tell? Because the percentage of loads that they are booking with just one or two brokers goes way up. And you know what that tells me? That tells me that they're not making a lot of phone calls. And these brokers are supposedly brokers that we have great relationships with, this and that. And yeah, we do have good relationships with them. But doesn't mean that they always give me the best rate or the best freight. And so I can absolutely see when our dispatchers are getting lazy and they're turning trucks over to some of these brokers. And guys, that's like the fox guarding the hen house, with all due respect to the brokers, because the brokers are making money on both ends. And that's fine. I understand that they do that, but I'm not a big fan of turning my livelihood over to somebody else. I'm not ready to hand the keys over to the kingdom just yet. So if you have a dispatching service, use caution with that, because I see some of it, and it's cost us a lot of money. I'm telling you. There have been times when we've had dispatchers, they've lost us a lot of money, and thankfully we had situations where that money was being offset by another dispatcher or whatever. But be careful there. So Cal's in the house. That's it. TS has been doing this since he was 23. He's 30. This will be my last year to do anything with trucking. Man, TS, there's it's a tough business. I say that in a lot of videos. It's a tough business, man. What you guys do. For sure. I would take the opportunity, guys, to foster some of those relationships for shippers in your area, especially if you can find some opportunities to do some short stuff. Because I can tell you right now, again, we're a shipper as well, and we want to take care of and financially as well as kind of professionally the guys that are taking care of us. And so when we have drivers that are coming in doing a good job for us, we want to make sure those trucks stick around, those drivers continue to come back. And I guarantee you, shippers in your area are the same way. So, spend the time Googling companies around you, find opportunities, make some phone calls, knock on some doors, and, introduce yourself. And I'm telling you, a lot of companies really are in need for good drivers and somebody that's going to be consistent, show up and do a good job. So foster those relationships when you guys are talking with brokers or customers. You guys are at shippers and receivers every day. Foster those relationships. Get a business card. Business cards are cheap. Go get 500 business cards, and anytime you get unloaded or loaded quickly, or they do a good job, take 5 minutes, talk to the transportation manager, the shipping manager, and give them your business card and say, hey, right, you guys did an awesome job. Right, this makes my life easy. I'd love to haul more freight for you guys. I mean, taking that, everybody can make time, can make 2 minutes to receive a compliment, right? Are you taking the time? And look, we're all guilty of it, especially you guys. When you guys have been sitting somewhere for an hour, 2 hours getting loaded or unloaded, who wants to take 5 more minutes, especially if your clock's running? Man, that 5 minutes might pay big dividends. Tia says, don't get me wrong, I made great money. I own a small fleet, about 20 trucks here in Cali. It's time to go fishing. Listen, I can't argue with you there. SoCal's going to come in. He's going to plug it. Chase that money, right? That's right. Chase that money. Why a driver doesn't see it as of the company is making money, they are making money, baffles me. I'll tell you, man, I've been so thankful for how our drivers are handling the stuff that I'm throwing at them. It's been a pretty significant change for them. I want to get them unloaded, and I want to get another load on their trailer the same day. That's not something that they are accustomed to, and that can be a pretty significant change. I'm asking that they watch their hours very closely, and I'm asking that they run pretty hard, and they're doing it. And when push comes to shove, right, they are very appreciative of the miles that they're getting. And furthermore, I mean, they realize, I had a guy tell me today, he's like, look, I get paid really, really well to do this job. And he's like, if the company's not making money, then I don't have the opportunity here to make really, really good money. So he sees it that the company needs to win, and then he needs to win. And not everybody looks at it that way. And so I'm really appreciative. Most every one of our drivers have had that same conversation with me over the past couple of weeks. And so, like I said, man, that's a compliment, and everybody enjoys getting a compliment. So. The only hard part I'm going to face is getting off those trucks. I can't imagine, man. Having done something that's in your blood that you just love, it's got to be rough to just to get out of the truck. I know Will and I were talking about that. That's you guys know. I used to do. I traveled like you guys do. I just did it on an airplane, and I'm telling you, after like 2 or 3 days at home, I just sort of start getting this like itch. And it's like, man, I need to go see a customer. I need to book a flight. I need to go. I just start getting restless. So, hey, I know what you mean, man. Sheldon, hello from Oregon. How's it going? I heard you guys got a little bit of snow up there. So that's what I got. Hopefully you guys are. Hopefully some of you guys are seeing some good rates, or some of you guys at least getting some good rates. I hope that's the case. What would be the best way to sell off these trucks, you think, at the end? Man, I don't know. I think here's my opinion on kind of the lease op space. I think when rates are really great, you have a lot of guys that want to get into the lease op space. What I would expect to see is, there's been a lot of companies we've offering 50, 55, 60 plus cents per mile over the past year or so. If rates do stay significantly lower, a lot of guys are suggesting that cents per mile pay to drop back down to, rates in the 40s, because the companies are going to struggle to stay in business if they don't. So I would expect to see the driver pay drop. I would expect to see the company's revenue and profitability drop. How could it not if rates are going to be lower? So I expect to see things like that get reined back in. But the other interesting thing is, when that happens, I think obviously the company drivers, that's a really big pain point. So TS, I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of those guys say, screw this, I can go make more money as a lease op, right, or an owner operator. And so I think this is this very strange cycle that I tend to see, that when rates are great, you see a lot of lease operators. When rates get poor, driver pay continues to sort of regress. And then you got more guys that say, I'm going to go do this on my own. So I think that you're going to have probably not a particularly tough time in selling. What I would tell you is, the old rule, right? Don't wait till the rates tank. I would go ahead and sell it while rates are good. No snow in the valley. I've got my CDL fresh off the press, about to start my orientation, hit the road to complete my contract with Snyder. Well, good for you, man. Congratulations. You've got to be probably incredibly excited. So good for you, man. I'll be going straight into teams with my buddy. Oh, cool. I hope your buddy's got some experience and can kind of help you show the ropes. Any advice? Yeah, you know what? Honestly, man. So there's a lot of guys. So you probably know about this industry. There's a lot of guys that got a lot of experience. They're kind of old and crusty. I'll tell you what my dad tells me often: son, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and God gave you that for a reason. So ask some, especially men in Oregon, right? You got some big mountains out there. So ask some of these guys for some solid advice. And I think the other thing is, in this industry, you're going to get a lot of conflicting advice, and I think it's going to be really difficult to sift through that. So find a couple of individuals that you trust and that have been around this industry and know their way around. Listen to everybody and kind of apply your own filter to the advice that you get. I think that was the biggest frustration that I experienced kind of coming new into the industry is just a tremendous amount of conflicting advice. And that was tough. Cracker says, I recently moved from a certain orange mega carrier to a bit smaller, yet still a large company, making much better money. Unfortunately, the truck I've been given is one of those in the shop trucks. Well, that sucks. That does suck. Prime is the best if you can stay away from their lease. Great trainer company. Man, I've heard a lot of people praise Prime and their training program. Cracker says he'd rather run and keep going. He doesn't like sitting. No wife, no kids, nothing to keep you down somewhere. I'd like to get paid to travel and see things. I enjoy driving, but I like to work too. Cracker, then you should send me an email. We're hiring. If you guys want to work and you want to keep busy, thetruckingexec@gmail.com. Fuel prices down. Yes. Here's what's funny though, guys. What's interesting is typically you're going to see the better paying rates when fuel prices are up, and so that's going to be a higher percentage of your cost. But I think if you tend to look at it, when fuel is around 350 gallons, you're probably going to be profiting more than if fuel prices are down, around $2. Yes, your operational costs are going to be lower, but I think your profit will actually be a little bit higher when fuel is higher. At least that's kind of been some of the data that we've seen. So it's 11:45. I actually have a couple hours of work to do. They do make you more money. Yeah, So stupid long video. Charlie made fun of me when I said initially that this was probably going to be a short one, and it's one of the longest ones. So I'll let you guys get out of here. Last question or two. Let's see. That's a good point on profit margin regarding fuel to rate ratios. It is, again, look, I think the caveat there is if fuel is higher and you're running a truck that's got really poor, MPGs, that's probably not the case, right? Again, what we see, I'm not saying it's across the board, what we see in running our, we see a little bit better profit when we're there. And again, our trucks are not, as I mentioned before, our trucks are not spec'd ideally. Because when we run outside freight, we typically, it's 35,000 to 42,000 pounds, and a lot of freight. When we haul flowers, it's 10 to 15,000 pounds, and so we try to have met that happy medium relative to our gear ratios. So we don't get the best fuel mileage because again we try to hit that happy medium. But I don't know. That's it. Cool. Johnny, you're welcome, man. Thanks. As always, man, you guys making miles, stay safe. Some weather coming across the upper top part of the country. So you guys get some eyes on that. Be careful. And